The rain fell hard over the Zarna market, turning the dirt roads into sticky mud. Neon lights blinked above rusty stalls. Alien traders shouted under sagging plastic covers, their voices echoing off cracked metal panels and wet stone walls. Everything smelled like rust and damp spice. The kind of scent that clung to skin and stayed for days. No one cared about kindness here. Not in the rain. Not in the middle of desperation. In the middle of it all, a woman stood with her head bowed, soaking wet, her clothes torn and sticking to her skin. She was thin, shivering, and pale green, her arms clutched a small child close to her chest, wrapped in a dirty, threadbare blanket. The boy didn't move much. His small frame trembled faintly, and his eyes remained shut. His breathing came in wheezing gulps. "Please," the woman whispered to the crowd that never really stopped to listen. "He's burning with fever. He can't breathe." A vendor turned his head, took one glance at her, and looked away. A guard near the gate gave a half-laugh and spat in the mud. "Don't bring sick ones here. Take your dying brat elsewhere." "I'll work," she said louder, voice cracking. "I'll clean your floors. I'll sleep under your stall. Just help him. Please." Still nothing. Someone threw a handful of dust at her. "Leave. He'll infect us all." She stumbled back, pressing herself to a corroded metal wall, sliding down until she crouched in the mud, clutching the boy tighter. Her legs gave out, her head hung low. A single whimper escaped the child's mouth, weak, barely there. His skin shimmered faintly beneath the blanket, blue lights pulsing beneath the surface. It looked like a heartbeat seen through translucent crystal. No one came. Until someone did. He stepped out from the crowd like a ghost made flesh. A human, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a soaked brown coat and mud-covered boots. Dark hair clung to his forehead. His beard was trimmed but not clean. And his eyes, deep, quiet, unreadable, settled on the woman without flinching. He stood still, watching her. She noticed him slowly, lifting her gaze through strands of wet hair. For a moment she looked more afraid. Was he going to spit, too? Kick her? Call the guards? Instead, he knelt beside her. "Is he dying?" the man asked. She blinked. "What?" He repeated gently, "Your son, is he dying?" Her lips trembled. I think so. He hasn't eaten in days. His body's hot. He keeps coughing. I tried giving him water, but he just chokes more." He placed a hand on the boy's forehead. It was burning, and the glow under his skin, blue veins of light, pulsed in a way that didn't seem natural. But the boy was still breathing. "What's his name?" "Teal," she whispered. "Mine's Mark." He took off his coat and wrapped it around both of them. Then he looked her in the eyes. "Come with me. I'll help." She froze. You don't want money?" "No. You're not going to sell me?" He shook his head. "I fix broken things. Let's see if I can fix this." Teal lay sleeping on the cushioned bench beneath a thin warming blanket, the pulsing glow beneath his skin dimmer now but still present. The small repair hut buzzed faintly with old power cells, casting a soft yellow light across the room. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the wind hadn't. It howled past the sealed door, carrying with it the distant groan of faraway towers and the quiet whisper of a world that didn't care. Saya sat near the boy, her back against the metal wall, a cup of broth resting untouched in her lap. She watched his tiny chest rise and fall. The last of her strength had been spent, but her eyes stayed sharp, fixed on her son. Every breath he took felt like a miracle. Every twitch of his fingers, a reason to hope. Mark returned from the storage chamber, holding a worn-out handheld scanner. He moved with practiced quiet. He'd worked on machines that screamed when touched wrong, engines with tempers, sensors that spat out lies. But this boy wasn't a machine, and the readouts were too strange. He's stable, Mark said softly, kneeling beside Teal. But something's off. Saya looked up. What do you mean? Mark activated the scanner. Its screen flickered and showed lines of code, bio readings, shifting data. He turned the device so she could see. His cells, they're overactive. Not in a viral way. Not infection. More like, they're building something. She frowned. What kind of sickness builds? Not a sickness, Mark murmured. Not exactly. He set the scanner down and looked at her directly. Has he always glowed like this? Saya hesitated. Since the day he was born. And no one helped. Her face twisted. They called him cursed. Said the glow was a sign of something unnatural. The elders told me to leave. We fled the village that night. Mark looked back at Teal, thinking. The glow wasn't fading completely. And the scanner showed something else now. Beneath the bio readings was a faint pulse, steady, rhythmic, electronic. You mind if I check his back? He asked gently. She nodded, moving closer. Mark carefully pulled back the blanket and lifted Teal's shirt. There, hidden beneath the skin at the base of his spine, was a faint red light. Blinking. Steady. It's a transmitter, Mark said quietly. Saya stiffened. A what? Someone tagged him. Maybe when he was still a baby. Maybe before you even left the village. It's sending signals. To who? She whispered. He didn't answer. But he walked to the corner of the hut, flipped open a rusted panel, and activated a jamming field. The energy buzzed in the air, and the lights flickered once. It won't stop them forever, he said. But it'll block the signal for now. She stood and walked toward him. Who would do this to a child? Mark leaned on the worktable, staring at the old circuits like they might give him answers. I've heard rumors. About the Dawn Seed program. Genetic trials, hybrid tests. Soldiers who never bled. Children bred for environments no one else could survive. That was during the war, Saya said. The war ended. The labs didn't. She sank down beside him, her hands clenched. I never asked for this. No one asks, Mark said. But someone made sure he survived the womb. They wanted to see what he'd become. Saya looked at him with fear. So he's not natural. He's alive, Mark said. And he's yours. The silence outside the hut felt unnatural. Even the wind had stopped hissing across the dunes. Something in the air had shifted, Mark felt it in the way his tools stopped humming, in how the lights flickered without reason. A storm wasn't coming. Something worse was. He sat on the edge of the workbench, rifle within reach, his eyes scanning the radar. One blip appeared. Low. Fast. Too fast for a merchant or a patrol. We've got company, he muttered. Saya stepped in from the side room where Teal was still sleeping. Who? Mark stood, flicked a switch, and the external monitors came to life. The image on the screen showed a ship slicing through the dusk sky, small, black, and silent. No identification beacons. No landing lights. Retrievers, he said. Saya's breath caught. They found us? Already? They tracked the signal before I blocked it. It was enough, he looked at her. Get Teal into the cellar. Now. What about you? I stay here. I slow them down. She hesitated for a heartbeat but then nodded. Without argument, she rushed to gather Teal, gently wrapping him in a fresh blanket. The boy stirred but didn't wake fully. Mark heard the ship landing. Engines whined down to a ghostly whisper. His hand hovered over the old rifle's grip. The last time he'd fired it was 3 years ago. He'd hoped it would never be needed again. Outside, the ship's doors opened with a hiss. Sand scattered. Shadows stepped out, 3 figures, tall, armored in matte black exosuits. They moved with perfect synchronization. One of them raised a scanner. Subject 17 located. Retrieval protocol engaged. Mark stepped outside. Turn around, he called. He's not yours. One of them tilted its helmet. You are unregistered. Civilian interference will be punished. Mark didn't flinch. Try me. The blast came fast. Mark dove behind the scrap pile beside the hut, returning fire. Plasma bolts screamed through the night. Metal sparked. The retrievers advanced without pause. Mark hit one in the shoulder. No damage. They weren't soldiers, they were machines wrapped in bone, unfeeling, unrelenting. Below, in the cellar, Saya held Teal close. The boy twitched in her arms, glowing brighter. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Mama. Asvich, stay still, she whispered. They're here, I can feel them. I know. But Mark's here too. Teal blinked slowly, I can help. You need to rest. I don't want to hide anymore. Before she could respond, his body began to glow brighter, blue veins of light weaving across his arms and chest. Teal, no. He stood, shakily, then walked up the stairs. Outside, Mark was down to his last charge cell. The retrievers surrounded the hut, weapons drawn. Final warning, one said. And then, a soft voice interrupted the night. Stop. They turned. There stood Teal. Small, barefoot, glowing like a rising star. Subject has activated, the lead retriever said. But before they could fire, Teal raised his hands. The air cracked. Not with fire. Not with sound. But with force. Light poured from his palms. It wasn't violent. It was beautiful. And it bent the air. The retrievers froze, their systems overloading. Sparks danced across their armor. One fell to its knees. Another screamed in static. The third staggered back and collapsed. Mark watched, stunned. Teal swayed, then fell forward. Saya ran out and caught him. Mama, I didn't want them to hurt you. You saved us, she whispered, holding him tightly. Mark approached, eyes wide. He didn't attack them. He just stopped them. He's not just sick, Saya said. He's something more. Mark looked at her, then at the scorched sand, and nodded. We have to leave. They won't stop coming. Saya met his gaze. Then where do we go? Someplace forgotten. Follow me. The canyon swallowed them in silence as Mark's old hauler slid between jagged rocks and wind-beaten ridges. They had been flying for hours, staying low, running silent. Above them, satellites circled, watching. But down here, in the cracks of the world, there was still room to disappear. Saya sat in the rear seat of the cockpit, holding Teal close. He was breathing again, deeper this time, less strained. The glow beneath his skin had dimmed to a faint shimmer. Not gone. Never gone. But resting. How far is it? She asked softly. Not far now, Mark replied. It's an old Earth outpost. Forgotten before the last war even ended. No one maps it anymore. No signal. No noise. Just rock and dust. Saya leaned her forehead against the cool window and watched the cliffs blur past. That sounds perfect. When they finally landed, the base revealed itself only as a jagged rock formation at first. But Mark led them through a narrow tunnel, past rusted doors, and into the forgotten bones of a facility once built to survive war. Now it would survive something else. Will it keep us hidden? She asked, her voice echoing in the dark hall. If it doesn't, Mark said, then nothing will. They settled in slowly. The first night passed in silence. Teal slept between makeshift blankets. Saya sat by his side, humming an old melody from her village, a lullaby no one sang anymore. Mark watched from the doorway, arms folded, eyes tired. "He's stable," he said after checking his makeshift monitor. "But whatever's inside him, it's not finished." Saya nodded. "I think it won't be until he chooses what to be." Mark stepped closer. "You speak like you understand it." "Maybe I do," she whispered. "I carried him inside me while everything around me burned. And still, he grew. I think he was made to survive. But not alone." Mark sat down beside her. The firelight danced across their faces. "You saved him," he said. "No," Saya replied, resting her hand on Teal's chest. "He saved me." The base was quiet again. Not because the danger had passed, but because danger had simply learned to wait. In the dim orange glow of an old wall lamp, Teal slept soundly between two worn blankets. The glow beneath his skin had settled into something calm, no longer pulsing with panic or fear. Nearby, Saya sat with a strip of cloth in her hand, wrapping it around her forearm, which still bore the bruise of her last fight. Mark leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, a patch over a small cut on his brow. "You should rest." "I will," Saya said. "After I finish this." Mark nodded. He knew better than to argue. Saya had changed. She wasn't the quiet, trembling voice in the rain anymore. She had steel in her spine now. And tenderness, too, but not the kind that breaks easily. "He called me father last night," Mark said after a pause. Saya looked up. "He didn't ask," Mark added with a smile. "Just said it. Like it had always been true." Saya's lips parted in a soft breath. "I hoped he would. I didn't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," she said. "Just stay. That's all he needs. That's all I need." Mark stepped forward, took the cloth from her hand, and helped her wrap the last of the bandage. When his fingers brushed hers, she didn't flinch. Their hands remained close, just long enough to mean something. Outside, storm winds gathered again. But inside, for the first time, a family had found its roots. The mornings came slow and golden inside the old earth base. The air still smelled faintly of dust and metal, but it was warm now. Lived in. Saya had hung cloth across the cracked windows, and Mark had repurposed scrap to form furniture, shelves, even a place for Teal's drawings. It wasn't a fortress. It wasn't a shelter. It was home. Teal ran down the corridor barefoot, chalk in one hand, a cluster of glow crystals in the other. "Look what I found," he shouted, beaming. His laughter echoed against the curved walls. Saya turned from the hydro garden, wiping her hands on her apron. "Glow crystals? That deep in the old shaft?" He nodded enthusiastically. "They hum when I hold them. I think they like me." Mark stepped out of the control room, wiping grease from his fingers. "Or maybe they know you've got their kind of spark." Teal puffed out his chest proudly. "You really think we're safe now?" Saya asked later that evening, the three of them sitting near the fire pit with bowls of stew in hand. Mark nodded. "As safe as anyone can be." The retrievers stopped looking once the project was officially shuttered. No more funding. No more records. Teal's off their books. Saya stared into the flames. "And if someone starts it again?" Mark looked across at her. "Then we make sure they don't get him." She reached for his hand. He took it without hesitation. First seeds bloomed 2 weeks after the storms passed. Teal was the first to notice them, tiny green sprouts peeking through the nutrient gel of the hydro tanks. He leaned in close, wide-eyed, pressing his nose nearly to the glass. "They're alive," he whispered. Saya stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "Yes," she said. "They are. Life had returned slowly, without fanfare. No great battles, no sirens in the sky. Just time. Just care. Just 3 people who refused to be erased. Mark worked long hours reinforcing the lower levels, converting one of the unused wings of the base into a learning hall. Not a school, not exactly. But a place to teach. A place for Teal to understand what it meant to be part of something that grew instead of destroyed. One night, Saya walked into the observatory dome and found Mark watching the stars. "You ever miss the world out there?" she asked. He didn't look at her right away. "Sometimes. But not enough to leave us." Mark turned, eyes soft. "Never." Teal's drawings began to change. He still sketched stars and birds and wide, smiling faces, but now there were maps, too. Tunnels winding through imaginary mountains, circles marking places he called bright nodes. He couldn't explain where the images came from. "They're just dreams," he said one evening, pressing red chalk to the wall. Saya watched, heart uneasy. "Dreams of what?" "Places that remember me," he answered. Mark stood near the entryway, arms crossed. He watched the boy's glowing fingers trace symbols too clean to be random. "You ever see these shapes before?" Mark asked. Teal shook his head. "They see me." That night, when Saya and Mark lay beside each other beneath a shared blanket, Mark whispered, "He's remembering things he never lived." Saya turned to him. "Or things someone else did." Mark nodded slowly. "We need to find out what they put in him. What he carries. Before it carries him." 3 days after Teal began mapping the tunnels in chalk, the humming started. It began in the middle of the night, faint, low, like the echo of a forgotten song drifting through the steel bones of the old base. Saya awoke first. She thought it was a malfunctioning fan until the walls began to vibrate in patterns. Mark sat up beside her. "Do you hear that?" "It's not the storm," Saya whispered. Teal walked into their room before they could call for him. He wasn't afraid. If anything, he looked calm. Glowing brighter than usual. "It's a memory," he said. "Not mine. But close." Mark stood. "Where is it coming from?" "Down. Under the sublevel," Teal pointed to the floor. "Past the sealed gate." Saya blinked. "We never opened that. There's no power grid to it." "I can open it," Teal said. The sealed gate beneath the base hissed open for the first time in what must have been decades. Dust poured out in waves. Stale air, long buried. The humming grew louder, resonating in the bones of the place, like something ancient waking up to greet its heir. Mark held a torch steady while Saya followed closely behind, one hand on Teal's shoulder. The boy led them forward, barefoot, unafraid. The tunnel sloped downward, walls made of old alloys laced with forgotten tech. The deeper they went, the more the architecture changed. Smooth stone gave way to faint bioluminescence, and markings appeared. Not human. Not even known. This place wasn't just a base, Saya whispered. It was a vault. Teal's eyes shimmered white-blue. They tried to bury what they couldn't finish. But it remembered me. It called me. Mark glanced at the tunnel ahead, where a large circular chamber now glowed faintly with pulsing light. "Then let's find out what it wants to show you." The sky above the canyon turned violet by the time they reached the signal tower ruins. Teal's steps slowed with each meter, his hands glowing faintly, the energy within him drawn like a thread toward the cracked stone spire. Saya and Mark stayed close behind, weapons holstered but hands never far. They weren't here for war. But the past rarely stayed buried. "It's under this rock," Teal said, stopping at a patch of broken earth. Mark scanned it. "No power readings." "Because it's not alive yet," Teal said. He dropped to his knees, placed both palms to the dirt. "But it remembers me." As the boy closed his eyes, the air shifted. Soft tremors moved through the ground, and below them, old circuitry sparked to life, dim lights forming a circle, symbols glowing like veins beneath skin. "What is this place?" Saya whispered. Teal didn't answer. Not yet. Because something, someone, was answering for him.